guys, and welcome to this VolksWizard video. Now I've had my Up GTI that you can see here for just over 6 months. I've done about 4,000 miles in it and I've used it pretty much daily. So I think that puts me in a good position to make a little video explaining to you about a few things that I don't like about this car. Now don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic car and I don't think any car is perfect, particularly not one for £14,000, but that doesn't mean there aren't a few things that could be better. And I don't mean things like the flat seats, because the first time I saw an Up GTI I knew the seats would be flat, nor do I mean things like the traction control, because I knew when I bought the car I couldn't turn that off. I mean a few other little things that have grown to bug me while I've had the car that I didn't know would when I bought it. So without any further ado, let me explain to you 6 things that I dislike about my Up GTI. Okay guys, let's start off with the first thing I dislike about my Volkswagen Up GTI. Now credit where credit's due, the quality of paint and panels on the Up is superb. There is nothing wrong with the quality of the pressings. They're all perfectly flat and true, and no waviness at all. It's absolutely gorgeous. You'd never know it was the cheapest car in the range. It's as good as any Golf I've ever seen. But there is one panel that does disappoint, and I think it's probably the only car in the whole range that's got a panel made out of glass, and that's the tailgates. Now for some reason these tailgates look like they're a metal panel that's been filled full of filler by a body shop apprentice on his first day at work. They're really, really wonky. I'll just try and pick it up on camera, but I don't know if you can see that, but just have a look at how the reflections are not being reflected particularly well. It looks a bit like a hall of mirrors in a funfair. Let's take for example those shutters. So they've got lots of horizontal slats. If you look at how they're reflected just to the right and up of the GTI badge, you can see they're really quite wonky. And that's because the tailgate isn't perfectly flat. It's not just there either. It's a bit distorted around there, and there's a real big distortion just here. It's about 1 mil sunken in there where you can see the side of the rear light. You can even feel it. Now I know it's a cheap car and we shouldn't be expecting perfection at 14 grand, or actually whatever the cheapest Up is, because it's the same tailgate on the cheapest Up, but it's just a bit disappointing that somebody at Volkswagen thought this was sufficiently good quality to put on one of their cars, because to my eyes it looks bloody awful. Okay guys, this is the second thing that I dislike about my Up GTI, and it usually happens when I arrive at work and I'm just reversing into a parking space. Obviously I'm in reverse. What happens is I turn the key off, the engine off, and take my foot off the clutch, and the car still moves backwards. On a lot of cars you turn the key off, there's nothing happening, but on this car something is still rotating in the box. Must be to do with the flywheel, and the car can move backwards sometimes like about 50 centimetres, which obviously if you're parking in a tight space could be a bit of a problem. So I'll just demonstrate that again. In fact, I'll take this GoPro off the window and I'll show you what I'm doing with the key, so you can see that the engine's off. So we will go into reverse, press the clutch all the way down, key off, okay, let's do number 3 and 4 from the comfort of the cabin of my own Up GTI. So when I bought this car I was well aware that it had traction control that I couldn't turn off. I didn't think this was going to be a problem because I've driven lots of powerful front wheel drive cars and I've never fiddled around with the traction control, definitely not on the road. Anyway, even a Golf GTI Club Sport S on Cup 2 tyres, through the winter it worked perfectly well. So I was pretty surprised when I found that this car was really hobbled by the fact that I couldn't turn the traction control off. But then I realised it probably actually wasn't the traction control that was to blame, it was more to do with the tyres. When I looked closely at them I realised they were eco-biased Goodyears, Goodyear Efficient Grip Performance, and whilst they're called Performance, that's probably only because they're a low profile tyre, they're a 40 section tyre. The compound I'm pretty confident is designed for emissions, not for grip, and that means that when it's cold or damp they really are not very good at even transmitting the 200 Newton meters of torque of this car to the road. Now, it's really frustrating, but it's also dangerous because you can find yourself overtaking cars. You're on the wrong side of the road, you do a quick change into say 3rd gear within the speed limit, and you find that causes the tyres to slip and the traction control kicks in, and you find you're going nowhere fast on the wrong side of the road. That happened to me back in September, one of the first sort of cold and wet days of the autumn, and I haven't forgotten it, I don't think I will. Now, I'm sure I could resolve that with a set of tyres, but I just really can't be bothered to fork out £400 for a set of tyres that may not be that much better. And, I don't want to go testing all the 4 that are available from big brand manufacturers to work out which one's best. The car should have really been fitted with decent tyres to start off with. After all, it is a GTI. Okay guys, let's deal with number 4. So the Up is famously a city car. It's very compact and very nippy around town, but there is one problem, and that is that it does not like speed humps. The problem arises because the car is very narrow across the front wheels, which means that these speed cushions that we get a lot in Birmingham are very hard for it to go over at anything like the speed limit. This is a 30-mile-an-hour road, and it's quite abrupt at that kind of speed over them. A Golf or at most normal cars of a normal width, even probably Polos, barely will feel the speed limit, but the Up doesn't take them very kindly. You can drive through the middle of them on some roads, but I can't really see how that's safer, can you? So you have to just precisely go over them as best as you can so you're as centered as possible, but there's no leeway. If you're slightly off, and I'm not going to demonstrate it, it's so horrible, you get a crash through the suspension where the strut's bottoming out. So yeah, it's a city car, but it doesn't like speed humps, which you only really get in cities. Okay guys, let's finish off with numbers 5 and 6 from inside the car, where it's a bit warmer. It's probably getting on for freezing right now, which brings me on to number 5. Now, in most cars you get heater vents on either end of the dashboard, as we have here, but you tend to also get something pretty decent in the middle of the car here. Unfortunately, on the Up, the best we've got in the middle is this pretty much flat one on the top of the dashboard. Now, having a flat vent on the top of the dash is not really the best way of blowing air at the driver, as I'll quite happily demonstrate with this prop, which is a microphone windshield. It's really light when it fires up. Right, yeah. So if you watch where it starts to blow, it's quite high up. So it's about here rather than down here, which means that it's sort of tickling my hair, and any warm air is going up anyway. Well, I'd rather really have it blown at me, because it's 1 degree now, it's 20 to 3. By the time I finish work at 6, I probably will have been in the ambient air for most of that time, and I'm usually frozen through. So it's just nice to have warm air to defrost my hands and fingers, and this car warms up really quickly. It gets to 90 within like half a mile, but unfortunately that air, the warmth, isn't being able to be transmitted into the cabin, so that is a little bit annoying. Okay, and finally we're on to number 6. Now, I test drove this car in early 2018, and I realised there'd be a few annoying things like the lack of one touch on the electric windows, so you have to hold the button to open and close them, but I thought that was perfectly fine. What I didn't realise, because it was winter and I was wearing as much as I am now, like 2 or 3 layers on my arms, was that if you drive this car with a t-shirt on a motorway for any length of time, you get a bloody sore elbow from having to rest it on this rock hard plastic. Now, it's very unusual for a car to have this such horrible texture here where you rest your elbow, but yeah, this is what you get with the Up GTI. Now, if you think about it, it's quite normal to rest your elbow on there, hold the steering wheel about here, so it takes the strain off your arms while you're driving. And if you're on a motorway run, you could be 2, 3, if you're going up to Scotland, 4, 5, even 6 hours, and after even a couple of hours you do end up with a really sore elbow from resting it on this hard plastic. Now, it'd be great if somebody somewhere could design some pads that would just stick on here, whether they're just black vinyl or even tartan. That would be super cool, as long as they're good quality and they're not going to wear out from having your elbow on. That would make driving this car a lot more comfortable. In the meantime, I think I'm going to have to invest in one of those corduroy jackets that your geography teacher used to wear with the elbow pads, because that would be another way of fixing that problem. Okay guys, well, those final 2 gripes are pretty easily resolved, as you can see, and this is still one of my favourite cars of all times because it's met my expectations more fully than any other car I've ever owned. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this VolksWizard video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, please comment, please subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one soon.